Hello? Welcome to another video on my channel. Today I will introduce you to a case that happened quite recently, in 2022. I don't know its ending, because the verdicts have not yet been reached. Nevertheless, as many as 3 arrests have already been made in that case. I invite you to listen to the story of the murder of 33-year-old Jared Bridegan. Jared was born on June 29, 1988 in Warrensburg, Missouri, but moved with his family to Jacksonville, Florida, as a child. Jared belonged to a well-settled family. Jared had 2 brothers, Adam and Justin. In 2007 he graduated from the Douglas Anderson School of the Arts. In 2014, he received a Bachelor of Science in Digital Media with an emphasis in cinema production from Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. Jared came from a very faith-based family and was himself a deeply believing and practicing Mormon. For him, religion was not just some add-on to life, but one of its foundations. At the time the tragedy occurred, he was working as a senior design manager at Microsoft. In 2009, Jared met Shauna Gardner, who was just visiting her friend in Florida. Shauna came from an influential and wealthy Mormon family from the state of Utah. Her parents founded Stampin' Up!, a paper products company that made multi-million-dollar profits. Let me say right away that the woman, thanks to this, actually did not have to work, because her parents made a monthly transfer to her account. It was apparently quite a large amount. They did so even after she married. The acquaintance of Jared and Shauna must have been quite intense from the beginning, because already a year after they met, in 2010, they got married in Salt Lake City. They initially settled in Utah, but later moved to Connecticut and then to Florida. In the meantime, their twins were born. A boy named Liam and a girl named Abigail. The move to Florida was supposedly due to their son's heart condition, as they were advised that it would be better for his health if they lived near the sea. It might have seemed that their life looked like a fairy tale. In fact, they didn't have to worry about money. They lived in a nice house, and except for their son's heart disease, they didn't seem to have any major problems. Yet at some point something began to fall apart. Shauna was initially a strong believer in Mormonism, which was undoubtedly one of the things they built their marriage on. However, a few years after their marriage, her faith was no longer so fervent. I don't mean to say that she left the church completely. However, it was no longer that important to her. Meanwhile, Jared did not change in this matter. I don't know if this was the only reason for the breakup of their marriage, but the fact is that in 2015 Shauna filed for divorce. Just 2 years later, in early 2017, Jared met through a dating app the love of his life, Kirsten. The woman later recalled that she was attracted by the kindness in his eyes and smile. This relationship also developed in a dizzying speed, as they married as early as October of the same year. In August 2019, their first daughter, Bexley, was born, and 2 years later they welcomed London into the world. Kirsten was 2 years younger than Jared and worked as a customer service manager, but after having children, she engaged in raising them full-time. Jared, Kirsten and their children settled in St. Augustine, Florida, 42 kilometers from Shauna's home on Ponte Vedra Beach. Of course, it wasn't that after starting a new family Jared forgot about his children from his previous marriage. They were still a very important part of his life, and he cared that they spent time with both him and their half-siblings. Shauna also moved on with her life and remarried. Her chosen one was Mario Fernandez Saldana, whom she met at the gym where he worked as a maintenance man. Let's now turn to the tragic events of February 16, 2022. On that day, Jared was spending time with Kirsten and all 4 of his children. They had a good time, but as is usually the case, time went by too fast, and before they knew it, evening had arrived and the twins had to be driven to Shauna's. So Jared drove them off and headed home with 2-year-old Bexley. Around 8 p.m. he drove through Sanctuary Boulevard, which is described as a dark residential street. Moments earlier, he had been on the phone with Kirsten and was acting perfectly ordinary. However, soon after he finished talking, he noticed a large damaged tire in his path, blocking his lane. So Jared pulled over, turned on his hazard lights, got out of the car and wanted to move it. As soon as he got out of the car, he was shot multiple times. As more minutes passed and Jared should have been home by now, Kirsten began to get seriously worried. She constantly called his cell phone, but he did not answer, which further deepened her fears that something very bad had happened. Jared always answered, especially when he was driving. Eventually someone else answered his phone, a police officer who told Kirsten that her daughter, 2-year-old Bexley, was feeling fine, but that she should go to the police station immediately. Jared was found lying next to his car, with multiple gunshot wounds. The car door was open, and Bexley was strapped into a car seat in the back. She was crying, but not injured in any way. Jared was still carrying his wallet, watch, wedding ring and phone. So it was immediately possible to rule out that the motive for the crime was theft. According to Kirsten, the tire was placed there on purpose. Jared always chose this route to drive his 9-year-old twins, and someone could have snuck up on him there. Weeks passed. Police were obviously investigating the case, but no new information emerged. This does not mean, of course, that the investigators were doing nothing. They simply did not share the progress of the investigation with anyone. In January 2023, investigators reported that after reviewing motion-activated surveillance footage, they were able to conclude that the tire could not have been on the road earlier, as there were no other cars that stopped or turned as they passed by. Thus, it looked as if it had been placed on the road to just stop Jared's car. The tire came from a 2004 Ford F-150. Eventually, they also identified a dark truck, a Ford 150, as the vehicle they should take a closer look at. However, they didn't have the license plate numbers, and it's well known, there can be thousands of such vehicles. So it took months before something could be traced. The reward offered for help in solving the case also continued to grow. A few days after Jared's death it was $8,000, and by May 2022 it had grown to $50,000. Eventually, police officers found a suspect on whom they could focus their attention. He was 61-year-old Henry Tenen, who was driving the exact Ford they were looking for. The man had been arrested 9 times before, for various minor offenses, and in August 2022, when his interrogation in the Jared murder case was made, he was also in custody pending trial, for illegal possession of a weapon and driving with a suspended or revoked license. The arrest report stated that he had a gun in the trunk of his car when it was stopped. On January 25, 2023, Henry Tenen was arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with Jared's death. He was charged with second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy after the murder, and child abuse. Prosecutors announced the case would go to grand jury, and that they hope it will be elevated to a first-degree murder charge. The last charge was that 2-year-old Bexley witnessed the murder of her father. Several weeks later in court, he pleaded not guilty to the charges. Investigators concluded that Henry had pulled the trigger, but had not acted alone, and the investigation was still ongoing. Of course, the fact that someone was finally arrested on suspicion of Jared's murder was a big moment for his family. They had been waiting for this for months. Kirsten commented on Tenen's arrest this way. I thought I had mentally prepared myself for these moments, but when his picture was shown and the charges were read out, my hands started shaking. I was not prepared for this. Fortunately, my sister-in-law was standing next to me. We held on to each other and somehow survived. No one in Jared's family had ever even heard of Henry Tenen. What connection could he have had with him, and why did he kill him? It turned out that Henry rented some property in Jacksonville, and the owner of this property was none other than Mario Fernandez Saldana, Shauna's new husband. On March 16th, Mario was arrested on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit a crime punishable by death sentence, and also child abuse. Mario pleaded not guilty to any of these charges. He maintained that he had nothing to do with Jared's death, and that Tenen was merely his tenant, and they had nothing else in common. Yet, the investigators traced the 3 handwritten checks that Mario had written for Tenen. Why would a landlord write checks for his tenant? It's usually the other way round. Tenen initially told police that after his tenancy expired in February 2022, he spoke to Mario only once, in May. Phone records, however, show otherwise. The men called each other 35 times in February, when Jared was murdered, 30 in March, and several more times in May and June. Just before Mario's arrest, Tenon pleaded guilty to second-degree murder with a gun and agreed to testify truthfully against any accomplice. In exchange, of course, for a lighter sentence. It turned out that not only Mario and Tenon were involved in the case, but also Shauna. The woman was arrested on August 17th on charges of first-degree murder against her ex-husband. According to the indictment, she and Mario conspired to kill Jared and persuaded Henry to physically do it. The prosecutor's office said it would seek the death penalty for both Shauna and Mario. Shauna was arrested in West Richland, Washington, where she moved after the death of her ex-husband. Her parents bought them a house there. She was awaiting extradition to Florida. After Shauna's arrest, information about what Shauna and Jared's divorce was really like leaked to the media. It took place on not very good terms. Shauna filed for divorce in early 2015, and in 2022, when Jared died, the issue of custody of the children was still unresolved. There were almost 300 different applications and documents in the divorce file. However, what the end of their marriage looked like really gives you the goosebumps. According to Shauna, Jared engaged in disturbing and abusive behavior, such as regularly listening to and recording her children, instructing them what to say. She also claimed that he threatened to use these recordings against her. Jared, in contrast, claimed that Shauna treated him in a humiliating manner in the presence of the children, and installed tracking devices in his car and the children's rooms. In addition, Shauna reportedly cheated on her husband. As a Christmas present, Jared hired a private fitness trainer for her. The man claimed that he had an affair with her. He did not want to make a statement to the media under his name, but said their relationship went from a purely professional one to an intimate one a few months after they started training. According to him, at that point, things were already going very bad in the marriage, and they even lived in two separate houses on opposite sides of the street. He also confirmed that one of the reasons for the breakup of the marriage was Shauna's departure from the faith. Eventually, Jared discovered sexually explicit text messages on his wife's phone, which she had exchanged with her trainer. However, Jared's friends claimed that he was willing to forgive his wife's infidelity for the sake of the children. Shauna, however, preferred to separate. Shauna has strongly denied ever having an affair with her trainer. Interestingly, however, the day after the divorce, she reportedly listed the trainer as her emergency contact, when she was filling out paperwork at a local tattoo parlor where she wanted a piercing done. What's more, an employee at that salon claimed that Shauna told her that she just wanted Jared to shut up, and reportedly even asked the staff if they knew anyone who could shut him up. Of course, these words could only have been the result of a difficult divorce, spoken under the influence of emotion. Unfortunately, in the context of later events, it sounds deeply troubling, though. Shauna's behavior after Jared's death is also described in the media as strange. About 5 weeks after the murder, she was partying at the Sandpiper Bay Resort in Port St. Lucie, along with her children, parents, and Mario. She appeared to be carefree. Her mother posted numerous photos of the trip on her blog. Jared, the man she once loved and the father of her children, was murdered. It remains unclear who was behind it, and she was enjoying herself on vacation. This seems inappropriate. But on the other hand, after all, she couldn't stop her whole life because her ex-husband was killed. The trip could also have been a good retreat for their children, who were already 9 years old at the time and must have been very much affected by their father's death. Shauna initially refused to speak about her ex-husband in the media. However, she finally decided to give an interview a few weeks after his death. With tears in her eyes, she said that evening, as she covered her son, he told her it was a good day with Dad. She also said that she was shocked to learn that her former spouse was dead. She even fell on the floor because she was devastated. She said she didn't know what happened to Jared, but she was cooperating with detectives and didn't expect to hear any criminal charges herself. She said, "Even though we didn't always get along, he was still the father of my children." Meanwhile, according to investigators, Shauna and Mario began planning to kill Jared sometime after they met in 2018. Kirsten suspected from the beginning that Shauna had something to do with Jared's death, and even prevented her from attending his funeral. Later, she also loudly criticized Shauna's family for isolating the twins from their half-siblings and relatives on father's side after his murder. The woman just completely cut off the twins' contacts with that side of their family. Jared's brother, on the other hand, said he would not go into details, but he had several conversations with Jared, during which he expressed concern that something like this could happen to him. He had concerns that someone might kill him. Shauna Gardner and her husband faces the death penalty. They are charged with first-degree murder, solicitation to commit a capital felony, conspiracy to commit murder, and child abuse. And that's it for today. Now we are left waiting for the verdicts in Jared's murder case. Let's hope that justice will be served. In the meantime, stay safe.